On November 19, 1863, Abraham Lincoln stood before 10,000 Americans to formally dedicate the Soldiers' National Cemetery. He was not the main speaker on that day. That honor belonged to Edward Everett, former Secretary of State, who spoke for more than 2 hours. When President Lincoln was given a chance to speak, he spoke for about 2 minutes. He delivered the Gettysburg Address, which has become one of the most famous speeches in American history. He paid respect to the soldiers who died at Gettysburg. He challenged their survivors to uphold the principle for which they died, a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. My guess is that President Lincoln would be certainly surprised, if not disappointed, to look at what has happened to the role of special interest in Congress today. Senators and congressmen are forced to spend so much time chasing campaign donations that Congress has become more responsive to lobbyists and corporate donors than it is to everyday Americans. It is personally troubling to me, if not embarrassing, how much time we spend behind closed doors talking about raising money for campaigns. Some argue that our government of, by, and for the people has morphed into one that is bought and paid for by special interest. Our fellow Americans see the corrosive impact special interest money has on our political system, and they don't like it one bit. Recent surveys confirm that Americans are losing faith in Congress. 8 out of 10 Americans surveyed in February believe that members of Congress are controlled by the people who fund their campaigns. 7 out of 10 believe that most members of Congress are willing to sell their vote for either cash or campaign contributions. Let me be clear. The overwhelming majority of people serving in American politics in both political parties are good, honest, hardworking people who are guided by the best of intentions. The problem is that even the best of us are caught in a terrible, corrupting system. This system creates the perception among average Americans that politicians are beholden to big money interest. The situation's been made worse by the Supreme Court decision in Citizens United. In that decision, which ignored decades of court precedent, a divided Supreme Court held that corporations and unions can spend as much money as they want to influence congressional elections. That's exactly what happened after that decision in the election of 2010. Last year, a record $4 billion was spent on federal elections by outside organizations, political parties, and congressional campaigns. Outside groups spent 500% more on congressional campaigns than they did just 4 years earlier. The amount of money these lobbyists and corporations are willing to spend is going to continue to increase dramatically, and more of it will be done in secret. We won't know the sources of the money that's being spent in these campaigns. Big money donors and corporations and lobbyists are spending tens of millions of dollars to elect candidates. It isn't just simply because of their love of our system of government. So no one should be surprised as you go out here in the corridors of this building to see who's walking the halls hoping to cash in on their investments. This flood of campaign spending from big corporations and special interest lobbyists is drowning out the voice of everyday Americans and crippling Congress' ability to solve problems. The Supreme Court may strike another blow in favor of special interest this term when it takes up the Arizona campaign finance law, enacted by the people of Arizona. Clearly, it's time for Congress to step in. Transparency is critical. We need to know which special interests are donating to candidates and how much they're giving. But our system is in desperate need of even more comprehensive reform. That's why I introduced the Fair Elections Now Act with 12 Senate colleagues. Our bill will allow candidates to get out of the fundraising business and focus on being senators and congressmen. The voluntary system created by the Fair Elections Now Act will allow candidates to run competitive campaigns without raising a dime, not a penny, from special interest lobbyists or corporations. Qualified candidates will receive grants, matching funds, and television vouchers to help them run their campaigns. In return, the candidates voluntarily must agree to only accept campaign donations of $100 or less from citizens in their own state. Fair elections candidates will be able to stand up and publicly say, I didn't take a penny from special interest groups. I'm beholden to no one but you as a voter, and I'll represent your interests if I'm elected. Now, they'll be able to say that. Those who don't engage in the system won't. Those who don't engage in this system probably will have more money to spend. But I'm betting on the American people when it comes down to this. That if you have people who stand up and honestly say, I'm here because of small donations and I didn't get the money from special interest groups, my opponent went the other way and spent a lot more money. You're going to see that person on TV and hear him on radio a lot more. Take your pick. I think that's a fair match. Not one penny of taxpayers' money will be used to fund this system. We pay for it by asking the businesses and corporations who earn more than $10 million a year in federal contract tax to pay a fee of 0.5%, up to $500,000 per year. Incidentally, these same corporations are now usually the owners of big political action committees, which spend dramatically more money than that on campaigns. So this is not a new hardship or burden to these major corporations and businesses. This Fair Elections Now Act will amplify the voice of everyday Americans, and I hope will break some of the gridlock in Washington. You might wonder why it's so hard to cut a defense program from the Pentagon, or why Congress can't get rid of tax benefits for certain corporations or special interest. The answer, I'm afraid, is very clear. For every program, tax break, or government contract, there's usually a lobbyist on deck, ready to pounce when their client's pet project is threatened. There's nothing wrong with that. That's part of our constitutional process, petitioning Congress. Members of Congress thinking about cutting the program, though, often have to look into the eyes of the same lobbyist who's writing a check that evening or the previous day to their campaigns. It's a vicious cycle in a corrupting system. It needs to end. Lobbyists and special interest donors won't have that kind of influence over candidates who participate in the fair election system. Restoring a government of, by, and for the people requires reforming the way we finance congressional campaigns. The Fair Elections Now is the vehicle I hope that will start that conversation.